Hello, MCU fans! Today we're going to take a look at the question of why America Chavez is so important for Doomsday and how exactly she's going to get pulled into all the craziness. So, lots to discuss. Let's dive right in and see what we can find out. So we've entered a new month, and that means we have a new contest. Be a subscriber, leave a comment, and you could win a book or a steelbook. Best of luck. That also means we need to announce our August winner, and that would be MC Lego Boy with this massive comment on the Thunderbolts video. So, MC Lego Boy, go to the About section of the channel and reach out via email or Discord, and I'll get you your prize right away. Also, we have a membership option with lots of cool perks, so you might check it out. Plus, hang around to the end of the video, and I'll talk about the Doomsday Countdown rewatch on the Discord. So the last we saw America Chavez, she was hanging out at Comertage learning magic. And in fact, that led a lot of us, myself included, to believe we were going to get the Strange Academy series, which honestly sounds pretty cool. I hope they do that. And in fact, if you've seen the Ironheart series, and I won't do any spoilers in case you haven't seen it yet, but no, there's some hints in that series that we may still get Strange Academy. But the first question about America Chavez is, where exactly did she come from? Now remember, in Multiverse of Madness, we saw this memory of hers being replayed, and there were her two moms. And in fact, when Doctor Strange asked, "Where is this?" she simply said, "Home." And then, unfortunately, she got stung by that bee, which scared her, and she created her very first portal, which sucked both her parents through it, and then eventually sucked her through it as well. Okay, but the question is, where is this place? Well, I just assumed it was a universe, somewhere across the multiverse. Well, actually, it may not be that simple, because on Marvel.com, they have this article that came out when Multiverse of Madness was released, and it talks about America Chavez. In particular, it says, in the MCU, America Chavez is a young girl from outside our multiverse. Specifically, the Utopian Parallel, a singular dimension unlike anything we've ever known. America is being hunted for her power, the ability to open star-shaped holes in reality, allowing her to travel through the multiverse and into other realities. So the words that really surprised me were singular dimension. So basically they're explaining that this utopian parallel is not a universe across the multiverse, but this singular dimension. Okay, well, so that means that wherever this was is the utopian parallel. And I'm assuming that's still the case. I mean, the article's still out there on Marvel.com. It just was never mentioned in the movie. Now, in the comics, they originally went in this direction as well. However, in the America Chavez Made in the USA comic, we learn there's a big retcon. The utopian parallel is a supposed dimension out of time and of the multiverse, and it was created by the breath of and exists in the presence of the demiurge. However, we then learn it was later revealed to be a figment of America Chavez's imagination, and that the real utopian parallel is a private island on Earth. Oh my word. So obviously in the comics, they went a very different direction with this retcon. But it seems that in the MCU, she is from this dimension that is located outside of the multiverse. Wow. Okay, so it actually makes sense that she came from this singular dimension because we learn in the MCU there's only one of her in the entire multiverse. When they reach 838, Doctor Strange asks, well, what about this universe's version of you? And she says, this universe doesn't have a me. And he's like, what? And she's like, none of them do. And he's like, yeah, but how do you know that? And she says, because I've looked. Now, granted, she admits that when he says, well, how many universes have you been to? She says 72. And now, of course, this would be 73. So she hasn't been across the entire multiverse. But this is what's really important. She says, I never dream. And as we learn in the movie, dreams are windows into the lives of our multiversal selves. So the fact she doesn't dream is because there is no other her to dream about. No other life, no other variant across the multiverse. Okay, so there's only one of her across the entire multiverse. But that does raise an interesting question. What if a universe branches while America is there? I mean, even the Watcher's like, yeah, what would happen? So, okay, she's in a universe, time is going by, right? And then suddenly a nexus event occurs, and we end up with A being the regular universe that's already there, and B being the new branch. So, is she in both? Because if so, then now there's two of her. So that can't happen. I mean, does she only show up in B, and she just vanishes from A? I mean, that's kind of awkward as well. But I don't know if it's much better if she stays in A and just doesn't show up in the branch. Although maybe, and this would be kind of cool perhaps, in B, like let's say you're standing there talking to her right when the nexus occurs, well maybe what you just suddenly see is her portal appear, that big star, and then she's just gone. She's not in B at all. I don't know. It's the best idea I can come up with, but apparently there is only one of her across the entire multiverse, so therefore she cannot branch. Wild. All right, so let's talk about these portals she creates. Is it possible that they function because of a miniature singularity that's created, a black hole, basically, that opens the rift? So kind of watch here in the center, and notice the little bitty star there. Well, notice it kind of turns white. In fact, there it's all bright white, and then it kind of, flashes, and then when it fades away, sure enough, the portal opens, and now we have the rift between the two universes. In fact, it's kind of like the rift and the way that it was formed in the Marvels, right? Remember, Dar-Benn uses the bangles to open the rift, and sure enough, as we look behind her, you can see the black hole, the singularity there in the center. There it is again, and then when it vanishes, boom, we have our portal. So, I don't know, just a thought. I mean, obviously, I don't think she's consciously creating a black hole. It's just that may be the way her power is working. But anyway, the important thing is she's creating these portals between parallel universes, disconnected universes. In other words, not the branched universes that we see so much of in the Loki series, but the parallel universes that He Who Remains talked about, the ones that are disconnected. And so to really tie this concept together, in What If Season 2, we saw the Scarlet Witch basically jumping between branches. They're talking about the fact she will save our world, referring to Peggy Carter, and in fact, they explain that Wanda Maximoff used her powers to reach into a neighboring universe for a warrior. The key there is they're connected, they're branched, right? And we see Doctor Strange doing the same thing. Here he is in Season 2 saying, "My name is Stephen Strange. I've been looking for you for a long time." And he's talking to Cohorti, which, by the way, I get asked sometimes, why am I putting a T in there? Well, it's because Marvel added a T. So there's no T in the spelling, but it is pronounced Cohorti. Anyway, not only does he pull in Cohorti, but then he also later jumps to another branch to pull in Peggy Carter. So we see a lot of jumping around between branches by both Doctor Strange and Wanda in What If. Yet, remember, in Multiverse of Madness, neither one of them, neither Doctor Strange nor Wanda, were able to get to 838. Because here we have Wong saying, when you could force America to send you to any universe you want, why take her power for your own? Well, the key is she wanted to be able to do it on her own. Wanda wanted that power herself because she was unable to jump between disconnected universes, parallel universes. In fact, Michael Waldron explained it perfectly during the Multiverse of Madness Assembled episode. He said it's impossible, near impossible, to travel from one universe to another. In Loki, you can kind of hop from one timeline branch to another, but you got to be anchored to some original timeline. In fact, that's what we saw in What If, right? Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange were anchored to one timeline so they could jump to another one. However, what America can do is jump from one universe to another. She can literally do the impossible. And that's going to be vital for reaching the other universes. Because as we've talked about in so many of the different theory videos, Loki's tree is just Earth 616. But to get to universes like 838, 828, 10005, etc., you need someone like America to be able to do it. Now, one of the first tasks for America will probably be to retrieve Monica from 10005. Because remember, she showed up there at the end of the Marvels. We have the Beast saying Charles asked for an update. We also have him saying, my theory is you somehow crossed through a tear in space-time. You are now in a reality parallel to your own. Once again, not connected. They're stacked. They're parallel. However you want to view them, they're not connected. That's the key. Then he says, of course, that is impossible. Now, the question, though, is how do we get America involved in this? Well, first of all, Fury has probably been searching for Monica ever since she vanished, right? He's very frustrated that he cannot find her. Likewise, we have Carol Danvers living in Monica's house, literally searching every way she can to try to find her. And by the way, notice she's wearing one of the two bangles and Miss Marvel is wearing the other one. I think that's worth keeping in mind where they're located because I'm betting they're going to come into play during Doomsday. But anyway, so you have Carol trying desperately to find Monica. And remember, Carol has worked with Wong. And in fact, Wong knows about the 10 rings. So probably Wong now knows about the bangles and the 10 rings. But most importantly, if Carol tells Wong what's going on, Wong can now connect them with America. Hey, I know someone who can actually jump between universes. So the trick is to figure out which universe did she go to. So that's what I'm really curious to see. How do they figure out that she's in 10005? But once they figure that out, America will be able to take them there. Now, it's also worth noting, we've seen at the end of the Thunderbolts that the Fantastic Four, or someone in their ship at least, is appearing in 616. So likely Reed Richards has figured out how to do multiversal travel, but that doesn't break the rules with America Chavez. America Chavez can do it inherently. She can do it with her own ability. Reed Richards has to have probably some type of multiversal core or something inside this ship and is probably using a black hole to jump back and forth. But anyway, perhaps he starts working with the Avengers and together they head to 10005, and that results in what I think is going to be an epic throwdown. Oh my word, can you imagine the Avengers and the Fantastic Four fighting the X-Men with Monica stuck in the middle? It is going to be so much fun. So that's why I think America Chavez is going to be at least one of the MVPs in Doomsday. She's going to be a connection that brings together so many of the different heroes and focuses them all on this idea of getting Monica home. So let me know your thoughts. How do you think America is going to get involved? And do you think she's going to end up being one of the most important people in the movie? You know I love to read and respond to all of your ideas. So don't forget, September contest, be a subscriber, leave a comment, win a book or a steelbook. And there's the membership option in case you're interested in that. And I always love to mention the Discord. Here we are in the metaphysics section, talking about Multiverse of Madness, Wanda the Darkhold, everything, you name it. Plus, I mentioned I would talk about the Doomsday Countdown Watch. Every day listed here, we'll be watching a different movie or show as we head towards the December 18, 2026 release of Doomsday. So we have 2,400 members across the globe, conversations 24/7, and I'll leave a pinned comment so you can join. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we'll all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, the ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.